Most people think silver is just another metal, something shiny, something that sits in jewelry boxes or gets stamped onto coins. But what if I told you that silver is quietly becoming one of the most critical resources on the planet? And what if I told you that one country controls more of it than anyone else? That country is Mexico. And right now, Mexico is changing the game in ways most people aren't even paying attention to. You see, we live in a world that runs on technology. Your phone, your laptop, the solar panels on rooftops, the electric cars everyone's talking about. All of them need silver. Not just a little bit, a lot of it. Silver conducts electricity better than almost any other metal. It's essential. And without it, the green energy revolution everyone keeps promising, it doesn't happen. But here's the thing. Silver isn't endless. It's not like you can just make more of it. It has to be mined, extracted from the earth. And most of the world's silver comes from a handful of places. Mexico's at the top of that list. In fact, Mexico produces more silver than any other country in the world, by a significant margin. Let me put that into perspective for you. In 2023, Mexico produced over 6,300 metric tons of silver. That's more than a fifth of the entire global supply. Peru comes in second, China third. But even combined, they're still chasing Mexico's lead. For decades now, Mexico has been the undisputed king of silver production. And that position gives Mexico something most countries don't have: leverage. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter? Why should anyone care which country digs the most silver out of the ground? Well, because the world is changing fast. We're moving away from fossil fuels. At least that's the plan. Governments are pushing electric vehicles, solar energy, wind turbines, battery storage. All of these technologies depend heavily on metals: copper, lithium, cobalt, and silver. Silver is especially important in solar panels. Every single solar panel uses silver paste to conduct electricity. Without it, the panel doesn't work. As the world installs more and more solar panels, the demand for silver skyrockets. And guess who's sitting on the biggest supply? Mexico. But it's not just about solar panels. Silver is used in electronics, medical devices, water purification systems, and even in the batteries that power electric cars. It's everywhere. Yet most people never think about it. They assume it's abundant. They assume there's always going to be enough. But that assumption is starting to crack, because here's the uncomfortable truth. Silver supply is getting tighter. Mines are getting older. The easy-to-reach silver has already been mined. What's left is deeper, harder to extract, more expensive. And while demand is soaring, supply isn't keeping up. In fact, some analysts are warning that we're heading toward a silver shortage, not tomorrow, but soon. And Mexico knows this. Mexico's government knows this. Mexico's mining companies know this. They understand that the power dynamic is shifting. For years, countries like the United States, China, and members of the European Union have relied on steady imports of silver to fuel their industries. They've taken it for granted. But Mexico is starting to realize that it doesn't have to play by the old rules anymore. Let me explain what I mean. Historically, countries that produce raw materials have been at the mercy of countries that manufacture goods. You dig up the silver, sell it cheap, and someone else turns it into iPhones and solar panels and makes all the profit. That's how it's worked for decades, centuries even. But Mexico is beginning to change that script. In recent years, Mexico has started talking about resource nationalism, the idea that a country's natural resources should benefit its own people first, not just be shipped off to the highest bidder. This isn't a new concept. Countries like Saudi Arabia have done it with oil. Bolivia has done it with lithium. And now Mexico is thinking seriously about doing it with silver. What does that look like in practice? It could mean a few things: higher export taxes on raw silver, restrictions on how much silver can be sold abroad, or even requirements that companies processing silver must do it inside Mexico, creating jobs and keeping more of the value chain within the country. These aren't radical ideas. But for countries that depend on Mexican silver, they would be a massive disruption. Imagine you're a solar panel manufacturer in the United States. You've built your entire supply chain around cheap, reliable access to Mexican silver. Suddenly, Mexico says, we're keeping more of this for ourselves, or if you want it, you're paying double. What do? You can't just switch suppliers overnight. There aren't that many alternatives. You're stuck, and Mexico knows it. This is the leverage I'm talking about. Mexico doesn't need to cut off supply completely. It just needs to tighten the tap a little bit. And suddenly, the entire global market feels the pressure. Prices go up, supply chains scramble, and Mexico gets to dictate terms. Now, some people might say, but Mexico needs the money from selling silver. They wouldn't jeopardize that. And yes, silver exports bring in significant revenue for Mexico, billions of dollars every year. But here's the thing. Mexico is also looking at the bigger picture. They're asking, why should we sell raw silver for pennies and let other countries make all the money turning it into products? It's a fair question. And there's another layer to this, geopolitics. The world is becoming more fractured. The United States and China are locked in a technology and trade war. Europe is trying to secure its own supply chains. Countries everywhere are realizing that depending too much on others is a vulnerability. And silver is right in the middle of all this. China, for example, is aggressively buying up silver. They're stockpiling it. Why? Because they know they need it for their technology sector, for their green energy ambitions, for their electric vehicle industry. And China doesn't produce enough silver domestically, so they're importing massive amounts, much of it from Mexico. The United States is in a similar position. America produces some silver, but nowhere near enough to meet its own demand. U.S. industries rely heavily on imports, and as tensions with China continue, the U.S. government is becoming more concerned about securing critical resources. Silver is on that list. So you have a situation where the world's two biggest economies are both heavily dependent on silver imports. And the biggest supplier is Mexico, a country that's right next door to the United States, but also increasingly willing to make its own decisions, regardless of what Washington wants. This is where things get interesting, because Mexico has options. It can continue selling to the US at current rates, or it can sell more to China, who's willing to pay a premium, or it can slow down exports altogether and focus on building its own domestic industries. And whatever Mexico decides, it's going to have ripple effects across the entire world. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this isn't just abstract. The price of silver has been climbing. In 2020, silver was trading around $18 an ounce. By 2024, it had jumped to over $25. And analysts are predicting it could go much higher. Some are talking about $30, $35, even $40 an ounce in the next few years. Why? Because demand is outpacing supply, and Mexico controls the supply. But it's not just about price, it's about access. You can have all the money in the world, but if the metal isn't available, you can't build your solar panels. You can't manufacture your electronics. You're stuck. And that's a position no country wants to be in. Mexico is also sitting on another advantage, infrastructure. The country has been mining silver for over 500 years. Since the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, Mexico has been one of the world's top silver producers. The mining infrastructure is mature. The expertise is there. The supply chains are established. That's not something you can replicate overnight in another country. Compare that to, say, trying to open new silver mines in the United States or Canada. It takes years to get permits, years to build the infrastructure, huge upfront costs, environmental reviews, legal battles. By the time a new mine is operational, the market has already moved on. Mexico doesn't have that problem. They're already operating at scale. And there's something else. Mexico's silver isn't just important because of the quantity. It's also about the quality. Mexican silver is some of the purest in the world, high-grade ore, less processing required. That makes it cheaper and more efficient to refine. Again, another advantage that's hard to compete with. Now let's talk about what this means for everyday people, because this isn't just a story about mines and markets. It affects real life. If silver prices keep climbing, the cost of everything that uses silver goes up. Solar panels become more expensive. Electronics cost more. That new electric car you were thinking about buying, the price tag just went up. Governments are pushing green energy. They're setting ambitious targets, net zero by 2050, all electric vehicles by 2035. But if the materials needed to build that future become too expensive or too scarce, those plans fall apart. And silver is one of those critical materials. Some experts are already sounding the alarm. They're saying that the green energy transition, as currently planned, is materially impossible. There simply aren't enough resources, not enough lithium, not enough cobalt, not enough silver. And unless something changes, we're heading toward a bottleneck, a point where ambition crashes into physical reality. Mexico is aware of all this, and they're playing their cards carefully. They haven't made any drastic moves yet, but they're watching, they're listening, and they're starting to realize just how much power they have. There's also a domestic angle. Mexico's mining industry employs hundreds of thousands of people. It's a huge part of the economy, especially in certain states like Zacatecas, Chihuahua, and Durango. These are regions where mining isn't just an industry, it's a way of life. Generations of families have worked in the mines. But there's tension. Because while mining brings jobs and revenue, it also brings problems. Environmental damage, water contamination, health issues for workers. Communities near mines often suffer the consequences while the profits flow elsewhere. This has led to growing calls within Mexico for reforms, for stricter environmental regulations, for more accountability from mining companies. And here's where it gets complicated. If Mexico tightens regulations or raises taxes on mining companies, production could slow down. That would reduce supply even further, which would push prices even higher, which would give Mexico even more leverage. But it would also mean less silver available for the rest of the world. It's a delicate balance. And Mexico is trying to figure out how to manage it. how to protect its environment and its people, while also maximizing the economic and geopolitical benefits of its silver dominance. One thing is clear: the days of taking Mexican silver for granted are over. Countries that need silver are going to have to pay more attention. They're going to have to negotiate. They're going to have to offer something in return, whether that's technology transfers, investment in Mexican infrastructure, or favorable trade deals. The relationship is shifting from transactional to strategic, and this is part of a broader trend. We're seeing resource-rich countries all over the world starting to assert themselves. Indonesia with nickel, the Democratic Republic of Congo with cobalt, Chile with lithium. These countries are realizing that in a world racing toward electrification and green energy, the ones who control the raw materials hold the real power. For decades, the global economy was dominated by manufacturing. Whoever could build things fastest and cheapest won. But now, we're entering an era where access to resources is becoming the defining factor. You can have all the factories in the world, but without the materials to feed them, you're paralyzed. Mexico understands this shift, and they're positioning themselves to take full advantage of it, not aggressively, not recklessly, but deliberately, with patience, with strategy. There's also a technological dimension. As silver becomes more valuable and more scarce, there's a race to find alternatives. Scientists are researching other materials that could replace silver in solar panels and electronics: copper, aluminum, graphene. If a viable alternative is found, it could reduce the world's dependence on silver, and that would undercut Mexico's leverage. But here's the thing: finding an alternative is one thing. Scaling it up to industrial levels is another. Silver works so well because it's the best conductor of electricity. It's incredibly efficient. Replacing it with something else might be possible, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen quickly. In the meantime, the world still needs silver, lots of it, and Mexico is the main supplier. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's trying to answer. Does Mexico continue on the current path, steadily exporting silver and maintaining the status quo? Or does Mexico make a bold move, restrict exports, raise taxes, demand more from the countries that depend on them? Honestly, it could go either way. Mexico's government is pragmatic. They know that being too aggressive could backfire. Other countries might retaliate. Tariffs, trade restrictions, diplomatic pressure. Mexico doesn't want to isolate itself. But at the same time, Mexico knows this window of opportunity won't last forever. Right now, the world needs what Mexico has. And that gives Mexico power, real power. The kind that doesn't come from military might or economic size, but from controlling something essential, something irreplaceable. And maybe that's the most important part of this story. We live in a world where resources matter more than we realize. We take them for granted. We assume they'll always be there. But they won't. Silver is finite. And as demand keeps growing and supply keeps tightening, the countries that control it will have an outsized influence on the future. Mexico is one of those countries. And whether the world is ready or not, Mexico is changing the game. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's not about predicting disaster. It's about understanding reality. The reality is that the green energy transition depends on materials. And those materials have to come from somewhere. And the countries that provide them are going to have a say in how the future unfolds. Mexico has been quietly sitting on this advantage for years. But now, as the world shifts, as demand surges, as supply tightens, Mexico's position is becoming impossible to ignore. The leverage is real. The power is real. And the decisions Mexico makes in the coming years will shape not just its own future, but the future of global energy, technology, and geopolitics. So the next time you see a solar panel, or charge your phone, or read about electric cars, remember this. Somewhere in Mexico, silver is being pulled from the earth. And that silver is making all of it possible. Mexico controls the world's silver. And yes, it's changing the game.